Hello, and thanks for spending some time with me today. In today's episode, we're going to talk a bit about this chassis, and I have the body up there as well on this 1989 Lotus Esprit Turbo. And it's going to be a bit different. There's not going to be a lot of wrenching on this one, but we're going to talk about things that I'm thinking of doing. I really want to hear from you guys actually on this. I want to hear comments, I want to hear opinions, recommendations, suggestions, especially for those that have dealt with this stuff before. And nothing is in stone here. I'm just kind of spitballing as I've now looked and admired this chassis as well as up above there on the body, and just amazed with the way it is and how simple this honestly is, but what the potential is of it as well. Remember, this is a full restoration, I'm calling it, but I also want to do enhancements. But for you purists out there, there might be some controversial things that I'm going to think about doing, but I want to hear from you and why I shouldn't do it, or maybe why I should. Some of the enhancements are obviously going to be for performance or handling, those sorts of things as well, and obviously make it look better and dealing with what I have here. This wasn't a perfect car when I got it. In fact, it was a project car from the previous owner, which is a project car from the previous owner. So it came in bits and pieces, which is really the only way I could have got into a Lotus Esprit, just because of the cost of them now. And this is the way I could do it, plus have some fun. It's really nice to take these apart and be part of that process as doing it. So let's get going and show you a few things that I'm thinking about. First thing, I got a question. I don't understand why Lotus, maybe it's just in the Esprit or back then, but man, they really like their nylon lock nuts that they used. Everything uses them. They obviously maybe had a problem with lock washers, or maybe it was cheaper than buying lock washers. I'm not sure the deal on it, but it's for disassembly, it's a little more of a problem, because you can't just spin them off your fingers when they're loose. You got to use a wrench all the way. Not a big deal. I may replace those with lock washers as well and just put normal nuts on. I don't know what you guys think. I don't see the purpose. They don't do it in new cars, having so many nylon lock nuts. Not sure the purpose of that. If you know, please put it down in the comments. I think everyone would like to know as well. But everything I see on here as far as the chassis and body, that's what they've used for whatever reason. So we'll talk about the chassis in general. So this is a galvanized steel chassis. It is kind of oxidized, we'll call it, dirty. I haven't tried washing it. I will try to do that. Galvanized steel is kind of cool because it's part of the original. I mean, it doesn't look great. Not that anybody really sees this, but I just want to clean it up. So I may try to wash it, but I really am thinking about powder coating it. Now, some of you might not like that because the purist says don't powder coat it, leave it galvanized. But if I can't clean it up properly, and if to clean it up that I got to take too much of that zinc protection off, then I'm kind of in trouble anyway. Something I do want to preserve in any case is this, whoever written this down, this Fed Turbo 2530 HG that's sitting here from the factory. Somebody wrote that down, and I want to preserve that. So even if I'm powder coating this section here is going to remain for sure. I haven't found any more reason other than that one, other than it's galvanized from the factory, to keep it completely galvanized and not do a powder coating on it that could just clean it up a lot nicer. So that's the first suggestion or thing I'm thinking of, and first suggestion I want you guys to maybe talk about in the comments if you could. Very curious about that. Now, as I get to the suspension and the front brakes here, front suspension, I'm definitely going to do on the brakes, I'm going to put stainless steel lines in. You won't talk me out of that. These factory ones are old probably anyway, and old rubber on them, and stainless steel, as you know, are a lot more stiffer. You get more immediate impact on those brakes. So that is going to get changed for sure. There's two in the front, obviously. They have some mids you can kind of see right here. And then obviously there's the two in the back as well. So I'm going to change that out to stainless steel lines. Along with that, I'm going to get rid of the famous red line here for the clutch, and that's going to be a stainless steel line as well. This thing's so easy to steer, and I think everyone would agree that has one. There's no reason to put the power steering in here. I'm going to keep the manual rack. I will pretty it up. I do have to check to make sure the ball joints and the tie-in rods and stuff are are good. I may replace them, but only if they need to replacing. Otherwise, I'll just clean them up. Now, a couple things to do enhancements. I am thinking of putting some aftermarket made for Lotus suspension parts, basically putting the aftermarket shocks and springs in. I'll put it in the rear and front. For those of you who have done that, how substantial is that from keeping the stock ones? These probably are still in pretty good condition. Hard to say. I don't know how well. It's got 70,000 miles on it, how well these stood up. It's probably been sitting on them for a while, so maybe they need to refresh anyway. So what do you think of that compared to putting just letting the stock ones on? Curious for those that have changed out how much better that is. Another thing that I'm contemplating, because this has really, they look actually very new, brake calipers in here, and I think the brakes are pretty good. I know it's a light car, and I don't remember the diameter of the brake discs themselves, but they definitely look a little small for my liking, and I may want to increase that. I know there's some aftermarket ones. Willwood makes some as well. A little pricey, but it might be worth it. So is it worth it? That's another thing I'd like to hear from you guys as well on that. So let me know. Yeah, I know I can research a lot of this, and I probably will. But I thought maybe this is something kind of a visual too for the community out there that ever wants to know, and just another source of information if they can go in the comments and find out the information as well. If I don't find out the information, I'll probably in a future episode comment on these questions or recommendations I want, opinions as well. And I may do a follow-up no matter what, even on the comments. So let's see what we come back with after this episode is aired, and there's the comment section below. So thank you for that, for any information. And I would like to also, if there's anything you think that I'm forgetting, missing out, suggestions that, I want to hear that as well. Can't have too much information, especially when you're kind of in the pre-stages of kind of planning what this is all going to be. So appreciate anything you can throw at me that way too. And it's all good for conversation. Someone comments, comment back to them as well. Let's get some dialogue going here just to see what everybody thinks out there. So I'm obviously going to do the timing belt. I've got one already to put in. I'm going to do the water pump as well and change that out because I don't know the age, and it's probably aged, we'll call it that, and should be replaced while I'm in there. I am going to take, probably the next thing I'm going to do is actually take the transmission out and then the engine and take that out and then start disassembling the suspension to get this chassis free for whatever I'm going to do for cleanup or powder coating. Once I get the engine out, or the transmission and the engine out, I'm going to pressure wash everything to start with, and then I'm going to see what I got to pull out to clean it out. I am going to do some fresh powder coat actually on this Lotus Red that they use on the top of from the intake manifold to we'll call this a hard pipe. Not sure the technical term for it, but I'll call it a cast hard pipe that goes into the turbo here. We'll clean that up. I do notice that on the, we'll call it the valve covers here, I thought they were actually red with a finish on the Lotus, just like the top here, but these appear that they were never red. So let me know, for those of you that do know, why some were red and some weren't. Is that just there's a certain spec for that, or a certain half year or whatever it was? But I'm curious whether these should be red or not, and why they might not have been, or maybe they've been changed. But I want to clean these up in any case, just to make them shine again a little bit. So we'll come back to the complete rear here of the chassis. And so this exhaust, I do want to probably change it out. I could ceramic coat a lot of it. You'll notice that this has twin ports out for the exhaust. Now they have, and I haven't got a picture of that at the moment because it's in another storage area, but the bumper cover that is in the back, it actually has the openings for these. So either I change that if I go back to the traditional one exhaust port out, or do I leave it the way it is? It's kind of cool the way it is. I know it's that V8 look a bit. I don't know what I'm going to do there. If you have suggestions of what I should do, again, let me know. I don't mind, I wouldn't mind putting a nice stainless exhaust in here, to be honest. I have looked a little bit. I think there's some that will make a kind of a split out like this for the 4-cylinder, and most of the ones I've seen just have the single as the traditional one. But I might want to leave it like this just because it's symmetrical. It might look okay, and it might go in with what I'm thinking of doing with the body. For those of you who watched some previous videos, they've seen the rear lights and what they did with the rear lights. They've changed them from those Toyota ones, which look okay actually. And when I get to the body a little later here, you'll see what I'm thinking of doing there and want some suggestions on that. Now this turbo, it's a Garrett T3, I can't remember if it's a 50 trim or what it is, but anyway, it needs cleaning up. I don't know what kind of condition it is. I haven't even checked for any shaft play in that to see if it needs a rebuild, etc. I need to check that out. If it is satisfactory, I may just put it in. I want to look to see if there's any porting a person can do on the turbine at all with the wastegate, etc. I don't know. I'm going to have a look at that. I know I've done that on my Mitsubishi products, on my DSM stuff, and maybe there's something I can apply here. Should I change the turbo out? If I do, what should it be? What do you suggest? I've been trying to research a little bit of what these stock internals on this engine can handle as far as beefing up the horsepower on it. I think maybe 100 horsepower more it can handle, which means it certainly can handle a little more boost and probably a little bigger turbocharger. Not a lot bigger, which is good because we still want the quick spool up. Maybe put a ball bearing one in instead of this one. But I also, again, want to know what suggestions are that I can safely get a little more power out of this. Now, something that is definitely a restriction is I don't have the charge cooler or any type of intercooling on here to get that heat down of the compressed air after it goes through the compressor wheel of the turbo. So as I speak of intercooling, it doesn't have the charge cooler, as I said. I am thinking of maybe putting some little intercooler in the back here, rather than put a charge cooler in and put a little radiator in the front to try and keep the air flowing, and then you need a water pump and all that, and there's some changes. I got to put some holes in the chassis because it doesn't have any for it, or run them underneath, etc. I just rather not do that. I have read a lot of people have tried to figure out, including I think from the factory, how to put some intercoolers in here. I've heard some put an intercooler here on this side where we have actually the cold air coming from the side kind of vent or whatever that comes in, and putting a little intercooler there. I've heard people try to do a long one in the front, but then you get turbo lag because you're trying to fill up those pipes. That'd be a lot of piping, and I don't want to do that. And you got to flow the pipes right. And anyway, I'm not going to do that. I am considering, what about, the exhaust side? I'll call it the hot side because the exhaust manifold's over there. This is the cool side, but maybe there's a little intercooler that can fit right in here and scoop up some of that under air draft that comes in. There's also maybe back here, but I don't want to get too close to exhaust even though the air is moving that way. Possibly in here or in here. In here is actually not too bad because when you look at how much piping wouldn't be a lot of piping. Just to put a little intercooler in there to help it along. Now I don't plan on doing a ton of track days, so I don't need it to worry about getting heat soaked too much, but I don't want it to get heat soaked immediately and then it's just getting hot air that's coming in here, and I just want a little intercooler in there that help it along. Let me know, again, if those of you that may have done something like that and experimented, let me know. I might be doing that after it's all finished because I can add it later. And why I'll do that too is I want to actually measure my intake temperatures, and then if I add something, I can actually tell you how much it changed the intake temperatures, if it did at all, and if it made it worse. I hope it wouldn't, but I don't think it would make it worse, but we want to see improvement. And then I can give you some realistic feedback. I am curious, again, how much extra horsepower this can handle, including with the stock injectors, which, of course, I could change as well and do some type of piggyback computer or whatever. Standalone I don't want to really do, but we'll see what's possible. I'm definitely used to modifying stuff like that, again, from other cars that I've done. And I want to do it safely, and I want to do it somewhat classic and keep it kind of looking stock. Well, I do want to keep it looking fairly stock, but also like it belongs. If I do add like intercooler piping, that'll like it belongs. So it's very subtle and looks appropriate for what this car is. These are a bit tattered, these clutch cables, so I may replace those. Obviously this is quite disgusting, this hose that goes from the airbox basically to the compressor wheel of the turbo. That'll have to replace. I obviously got to do a list of parts. Just like I said to the front, I'm considering doing the suspension to match the front, obviously, if I do aftermarket and make it a little better. I don't think I'm going to do much with the brakes on the back because I know the front does most of the work, and I might just keep these, the stock ones, where they are, and I think that'll be good enough. Just beef up those front ones is what I'm thinking. Again, if it doesn't make a difference, let me know, or how much of a difference, if it's worth the money, because it's a lot of money to put aftermarket brakes that are made for this Lotus Esprit, as some of you probably are aware. And something I really noticed, considering the power in here isn't what I call a ton of power, these, unless they're hollow, but if these are steel solid shafts as part of the axle, they are really beefy. They are really thick. Yeah, I'm really amazed how thick these are for the power delivery of this, but maybe they were ready for bigger and better things when they came out with the V8s much lighter. I don't know, but they look like they definitely can handle 500 or more horsepower if you were throwing it at the wheels here for sure, and had good traction. Well, that's going to cover this part, all the stuff that's on the chassis right now, on what I'm looking for comments, recommendations, and opinions. So please make sure you put those. I really want to see what you have to say about all the things I discussed and anything else you can think of. I promise we're going to get to a lot more wrenching coming up, but before we can do that, got to have a plan on what we're going to do. And that's what this episode is about, really. And I'm going to have another episode. I didn't realize how long this was going to take. I was hoping to combine it, but I'm going to have another episode to talk about all the stuff that's left on the body and what I'm planning to do there and maybe not do as well. And we'll kind of do the same thing, the same format on the next one. And then we'll get right down to business. Have some wrenching on that one, I think, as well. So to catch all that, make sure you subscribe, please. Thanks so much for joining me on Slipping Time. As well, enjoy every day and always make it right.